Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. Today, I want to focus on a book that I read recently, one that is about magic and shadow creatures that arise out of magic. I am referring to The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. I don't have a physical copy of the book as I read it on my Kindle, but I really enjoyed it, and I wish I did have a physical copy because there's a map at the beginning of the book, and I would have loved to have been able to follow along with the character without having to move back and forth across the Kindle. One of the unfortunate deals with having to use a Kindle at times. So anyways, for those that don't know, I've talked about Ursula Le Guin on this channel before. I read her short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, which was pretty good, and I've been wanting to read more of her work. I've heard about The Wizard of Earthsea in the past, but I've never checked it out, as no one has really nudged me towards that direction. And sometimes, that happens. I just don't find or seek out books unless I'm pressured to do it by certain individuals. You know who you are, and so I read it and I really enjoyed it, and I want to talk about it today. Definitely going to recommend it, but I'm not going to spoil it. Like, the book came out in the 1960s, so I wouldn't be spoiling much. But I feel like the book is pretty significant. So I'll do a summary, but I won't do any spoilers in that part. I might spoil something in the analysis section, but just be careful of that. So here we go. Yeah, without further ado, let's talk about Ursula Le Guin's A Wizard of Earthsea. I will do a summary analysis, and we will move on from there. A Wizard of Earthsea initially focuses on the character of Dooney. He lives in the village of 10 Alders with his father, and hangs out with his aunt, who is the village witch. She notices that he is proficient in magic, and so she starts to train him with what little skill that she has. She's just a basic witch at this time. And so Dooney becomes more skilled as he gets older. One day, a Karg invasion fleet comes to the land and makes their way to the village of 10 Alders. And so the people are scrambling around, and Dooney magics up a thick fog that helps protect the village. It makes it difficult for the invaders to see what's going on around them, but allows for the villagers to flee and also attack some of the Karg in the process. They manage to beat back the enemy and save the day, but Dooney collapses because he used too much of his power. He is an amateur after all. Luckily, a man named Guin shows up, who is a heal-all wizard. And he manages to provide care for Dooney, and he notes that because Dooney is particularly powerful, he heard of his legend of what he did to the Karg invaders. He's willing to take him on and train him so that he can be a better wizard and learn more about this very powerful skill that he has. Before he leaves, he takes on his adult name, his true name, which is Ged, and so he's no longer Dooney at this point in the story. He trains with Guin, but they're at odds with one another because Guin is silent and focused on adhering to a specific type of training. And Ged wants to learn more. He feels that he's capable of doing more at this point. When he's in a meadow one day, he stumbles across a girl who ends up challenging him on his abilities. And one thing she asks is like, "Oh, are you capable of doing summoning? Can you summon dead things?" And rather than say no and hurt his own pride, Ged says no, and he goes home and starts reading Guin's books that he has. one of them is a necromancy book, and he starts reading, but he can't exactly see what he's reading, and he accidentally summons forth a dark shadow creature. But luckily, Ogian shows up and beats it back, and so there's nothing to worry about there. Ogian, yells at Ged and tells him that he shouldn't be practicing such magics because the girl was she was a daughter of a local witch. They could have used his powers for evil, and wizards aren't supposed to use their magic in a show-offy way, kind of like this. So at that point, Ogian offers him a choice. He can continue training under Ogian and become very skilled, but hone his powers in the right way, or he can go to the wizarding school on Roke. And become more powerful that way. And Ged, for his part, notes that he likes Ogian, but he would much rather go to the wizarding school on Roke. And so they depart ways at this point in the story. So Ged attends the wizarding school, where he makes friends with a wizard named Vetch, but he also comes into conflict with a person named Jasper, who kind of teases Ged for his youth and his inexperience, and kind of shows off the fact that he's nearing becoming a sorcerer, which instills a sense of anger and jealousy and hostility in Ged. And one day they're arguing, and they sort of challenge each other to a duel. And one of the things that Jasper asks is, can he perform necromancy, dark magic like that? And again, Ged refuses to back down and hurt his own pride, and he accidentally summons forth the shadow creature again. This time it latches onto Ged and refuses to leave. The archmage Nimmerly shows up and manages to beat the shadow back, sending it away, but not totally away out of this dimension. And in the process, he dies because he used too much of his own power. And so through the next couple months, Ged heals, and he becomes better off for this whole event. He becomes less show-offy and takes to his studies, and is less impulsive and doesn't seek to learn too quickly, as he wants to synthesize the material rather than just use it all willy-nilly. The new Archmage actually talks with him about this, and lets him know that the shadow creature might be still out there waiting for him. Ged eventually finishes his training at the wizarding school, and he is sent to the land of Low Torning to take up wizardry and be the village's wizard, sorcerer, as they have been requesting one. The Archmage notes that he's sending him there for his own safety, as he doesn't feel that Ged is capable of defeating this shadow creature that he unleashed upon the world just yet. And so Ged heads to Low Torning. He meets a fisherman named Peckberry. They become close friends, and he also hears about dragons, but they're distant at this point in time, so he doesn't worry about them. One day, Peckberry comes to him and asks him to save his child who has a fever. And so Ged visits the child and notes that they're very sick, and they're also a little far gone. So they try to visit them in the realm of death where they're heading. And unfortunately, the child is too far away. So Ged tries to return to the realm of the living, and he runs into the shadow creature along the way that wants to try to claim him again and absorb and use him like a puppet, a Gebeth, as it's called. Luckily, Ged manages to flee back to the realm of the living without issue, but he becomes more paranoid and worried about escaping the shadow creature as it nears closer and closer to him. And so what he does is he takes to banishing the dragons from this land in an effort to help the people of Low Torning and make sure that they don't need a wizard at this time. And he's successful. He uses his cunning and a little bit of strategy to defeat the dragons and save the day. Ged tries to return to Roke to learn more from the wizards and possibly escape from the shadow creature, but because of the magical barriers that exist around Roke, because the shadow creature is too near to him, he's unable to make it past the barrier and into the Roke Bay. So he instead decides to travel to Oskel, and he's pursued by Skior, one of the sailors on the boat he was on, who is being used as a Gebeth, a puppet, by the mysterious shadow creature. Eventually, Ged makes his way to Terranon, to the court of Terranon, and manages to escape the shadow creature for the time being. What happens at this court of Terranon, and what happens throughout the rest of the story? Well, I will leave that up to you to figure out and find out, as it's pretty eventful, and I don't want to spoil too much from that. So that's where I'll leave it right now. In terms of analysis, there's a bit to talk about with this story. Le Guin packs it so full of interesting ideas and themes that I feel I want to talk about. The first is, okay, what is the nature of the shadow? This shadow that is following Ged throughout the story that he accidentally unleashes. What is Le Guin trying to say about that? I think one thing that you could say is that it's straightforward on the surface. It's a nefarious shadow creature that Ged has to defeat, and that's the end of it. There's no subtext there at all, and this is simply an adventure story about a man versus evil. And you could be right about that, but I think that's kind of limiting. There's not a lot. There's way more there than that you have to ignore so much in order to argue that. So I think that I think there's more is what I'm trying to say. Rather, you could argue this is a representation of dark and evil. Like it's a representation of good versus evil, where the good is Ged, and the evil is this dark shadow creature that Ged has accidentally unleashed into the world. There is an interesting quote that I would like to read to you. "If you left now, the thing you loosed would find you at once and enter into you and possess you. You would be no man but a Geveth, a puppet doing the will of that evil shadow which you raised up into the sunlight. You must stay here until you gain strength and wisdom to defend yourself from it, if ever you do." So that's the new archmage, Genscher, talking with Ged at this point in the story, letting him know that the shadow creature is still out there. But interestingly, he does highlight how this shadow creature is a thing of evil that Ged unleashed upon the world, highlighting that this is a story of good versus evil. And there's a number of other points in the story where characters note that that in this world there are forces of good and forces of evil that are constantly in combat against one another. And if the forces of evil were to win, such as the case like a shadow creature taking on the body of a magic user, that would spell doom for many people in this land. So Le Guin could very well be arguing that this is a story of good versus evil on biblical proportions, I guess. But one thing that I really like, and the interpretation that I'm more fond of, is this creature, this shadow creature represents the failings of Ged. He's the dark side of Ged, not simply evil, just the representation of all the things that Ged has done wrong. Because when he first summons the shadow creature in Ogien's hut, he does so because of pride, because the girl told him, challenged him on what he was capable of doing, and he read it completely in the dark. So a prideful moment for him. And then again, he summoned the creature the second time when he was in a fight with Jasper, feeling anger and envy and hostility, not healthy emotions, definitely more negative emotions that lead to rational behaviors such as challenging people to duels and summoning dark creatures. And so maybe rather than summoning evil, he just summoned a darker version of himself, the darker half of him that is responsible for all of these failings, and follows him around. There's another interesting quote that I want to read to you. "You have great power inborn in you, and you use that power wrongly, to work a spell over which you had no control, not knowing how that spell affects the balance of light and dark, life and death, good and evil. And you were moved to do this by pride and by hate. It is any wonder the result was ruin. You summoned a spirit from the dead, but with it came one of the powers of unlife. Uncalled, it came from a place where there are no names. Evil. It wills to work evil through you. The power you had to call it gives it power over you. You are connected." So both getting at the evil and the connection to Ged here, with Genscher, the Archmage, straight up saying this dark shadow creature is connected to you because of the hostile act you committed. You summoned a dark creature because of anger and jealousy, and this is the result. And so I think that's a very clear picture of the dark creature. And then the very end of the story, of how it's connected to Ged, when he simply finds the dark creature, when he's with Vetch, finally confronting the creature, and the creature takes many shapes, and then finally it takes his form. And in order to defeat the creature, he has to say its true name. And what is its true name? It's Ged. It's him. This is a representation of him. Ged is this dark shadow creature in terms of it being the negative half of himself. And he's able to defeat it once he accepts these negative parts of himself. He can't simply run from it anymore. And I think that's really beautiful on Le Guin's part. Wonderful storytelling. I kind of predicted that it might happen. Not to brag or anything. I just felt like this was a natural progression of the story. Sometimes when stories are predictable, it can be fine because that's good storytelling right there, especially if it's heading in that direction. The other thing I want to talk about is how Ged is an amazing character. Just one of the most beautifully written characters that I've ever encountered. Ged is a very powerful wizard. That's noted at the very beginning of the story because his aunt notes that he has he has talent in the field of wizardry, and it's even made more clear when the Kargs invade and he's able to create a fog that throws them off and prevents them from taking over the village of 10 Alders. So Ged is a very powerful person, but he does. It's very clear that he has weaknesses. He's not simply this powerful macho character that is incapable of doing anything wrong. He has flaws, as noted multiple times throughout the story. His pride, his hostility, his anger, his teenage impulses, because he's a teenager, they take over, and it leads him to do things that he later regrets, that he realizes were wrong. You could argue that this is simply a coming of age story where a teenage boy learns to mature by summoning a dark shadow creature. But I really enjoyed that because eventually he seeks growth. Like he confronts what he's been running from, and he acknowledges that these dark impulses are what led to the shadow creature being formed. And I think it's marvelous writing on Le Guin's part to create a beautiful, wonderful wizard character who is not simply the self-proclaimed chosen one who is incapable of doing any wrong. I also want to talk about the Terranon jewel. When Ged makes his way to the court of Terranon, he runs into one of the court ladies who tells him about the jewel. The jewel is a very powerful item that can tell the future, and it foretold Ged's arrival, so they say. There's an interesting quote that I would like to read to you in regards to how Ged views this jewel. Saret, I have no such power as you think. What I had once, I threw away. I cannot help you. I am no use to you, but I know this. The old powers of earth are not for men to use. They were never given into our hands, and in our hands they work only ruin. Ill means ill end. I was not drawn here, but driven here, and the force that drove me works to my undoing. I cannot help you. And so that's Ged talking to the Saret, the court lady, who is trying to get him to use this jewel, as he notes that using such dark forces and dark magic will only lead to ruin, because he's familiar with that, as it's the conundrum he's currently facing. And then it's later proven that these people were trying to use him so that they could turn him into their own shadow puppet kind of thing, to gain an upper hand in whatever dealings that they had going on. So he's proven right. But deep down, something that I think is at the surface there, or below the surface, is the fear that Ged feels when he interacts with this item that can foretell the future. Because he could very easily ask it, how do I defeat the shadow creature? What is the shadow creature's true name? That's what he's been looking for. What is my destiny as a wizard? He could very well ask these questions and get answers and probably find the help that he needs. But the problem here is that I don't think Ged is ready for that. I think Ged fears what those answers might be. That maybe he's not destined to defeat the shadow creature. Maybe he feels that he's not destined to be a great wizard at all, and that there's a lot of self-doubt and some sadness in him because of what happened in the past, and all of that, all the terror that he's been experiencing up to this point. Because at this point he hasn't confronted the fact that the dark shadow creature might be something of his creation that was born of himself. I don't think he's truly acknowledged that. So I don't think Le Guin intended for that reading to happen. I think she just wanted to point out that Ged is capable of outsmarting these terrible people. But deep down below the surface, it's interesting to think about because Ged is scared, and this very valuable object, he turns away from it because of this fear. At least that's how I feel. That's the interpretation that I would love to apply there. And those were the things that I liked. But one thing that I didn't like was the finale. How so much of it took place on a boat with them sailing across the waters into the shadow creature's domain. I personally thought that was a little boring. I would have much rather have it take place on land. But I guess it doesn't hurt the story that it went in that direction. It does get pretty exciting, especially the real awesome, amazing end where Ged confronts a shadow creature and realizes the true nature of it. I feel like that was a very compelling, and it kind of overcame the boring sea trek part. I don't think that it seriously impacted the story, but I would have preferred something different. So anyways, those are my thoughts on Ursula Le Guin's The Wizard of Earthsea. A brilliant, amazing, fantastic book. One of the best wizard stories that I've ever read. It reminded me of a cross between Harry Potter and the Lord of the Rings series, although I feel like it surpasses anything Harry Potter could hope to offer, just by Ursula Le Guin's compelling writing. Just really beautiful. I love the characters and the story, and the ultimate conclusion at the end, which I feel is one of the better conclusions to any story that I've read. I would absolutely love to check out the next book, The Tombs of Attune, I think it is. I would love to finish this series if possible, because I'm sure Le Guin has even more compelling work ahead of her. Those are my thoughts. I definitely recommend it to you out there. I might have spoiled it here, but that doesn't mean you can't thoroughly enjoy the story. So I definitely recommend it, and I'm maybe you'll join me in my next read along for when I talk about The Tombs of Attune. I'll be sure to let you all know about that. In the meantime, if you want to comment on something I said in my video, or you read the story before and you want to share your thoughts, absolutely do that below. I would love to hear from you and have a discussion about this amazing book. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about Ursula Le Guin's work. And in the meantime, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and shadowy travels. Farewell.